7-year-old Lucy's gaze, burning with a forbidden love for chess, fixes on the gleaming ebony and ivory pieces. "Daddy, look," she whispers, oblivious to the CEO's veiled scrutiny. Her father's curt refusal, "No, Lucy," hangs heavy in the opulent office. A silence thick with unspoken grief only Rebecca Harrison suspects. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves line the walls filled with leather-bound volumes that spoke of old money and older traditions behind the massive oak desks at Rebecca Harrison, CEO and sole heir to a business empire worth $3 billion. At 38, Rebecca commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, but today she sat alone in her office, staring at a chess set that hadn't been touched in 3 years. The intricate wooden pieces carved from ebony and ivory had been her father's pride and joy. Now they served as a painful reminder of conversations that would never happen again. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ms. Harrison came the voice of her assistant through the intercom. "Detective James Mitchell is here with his daughter for the community outreach interview." Rebecca straightened her powder blue blazer and composed herself. The Harrison Foundation's partnership with local law enforcement was important to her, though she wondered why Detective Mitchell had brought his child to what was supposed to be a professional meeting. The door opened and Detective James Mitchell entered with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. James was a man in his late 30s with kind eyes that had seen too much and gentle hands that spoke of someone who understood both strength and tenderness. His daughter Lucy had auburn curls that bounced as she walked, and she wore a cheerful floral dress that seemed to bring sunshine into the formal office. "Ms. Harrison," James said, his voice carrying a slight embarrassment. "I apologize for bringing Lucy. My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I couldn't reschedule this meeting." Rebecca stood and extended her hand. "Detective Mitchell, please don't apologize. And you must be Lucy." Lucy looked up with bright green eyes and smiled shrilly. "Hello, ma'am. Daddy says you help people." Something about the child's earnest expression softened Rebecca's usually businesslike demeanor. "I try to, sweetheart. Would you like to sit over there while your daddy and I talk?" But Lucy's attention had already been captured by something across the room. Her eyes widened as she spotted the chess set on the low table between 2 leather chairs. "Daddy, look!" "Chess?" Lucy exclaimed, tugging on James's hand. "Can I play?" James's face flushed with embarrassment. "Lucy, no. We're in Ms. Harrison's office. You need to sit quietly and let the grown-ups talk." "It's quite all right," Rebecca said, though something tightened in her chest at the sight of the child's excitement. She can look at it if she'd like. But James was already kneeling down to his daughter's level, his voice gentle, but firm. "Lucy, remember what we talked about. Sometimes we want to do things, but we have to wait for the right time and place." Lucy's face fell and she nodded solemnly. "Yes, Daddy." Rebecca watched this exchange with growing curiosity. There was something in James's reaction that went beyond simple politeness. As they settled into the chairs near the chess set, she noticed how his eyes avoided looking at the board entirely. "Detective Mitchell, tell me about the youth mentorship program you'd like the foundation to support," Rebecca began, but she found herself distracted by Lucy, who was sitting very still in her chair, stealing glances at the chess pieces with obvious longing. James spoke passionately about at-risk children in the community, about the difference that positive role models could make in young lives. His dedication was evident, but Rebecca noticed how he positioned himself so his back was to the chess set. Lucy fidgeted in her chair, clearly trying her best to be good, but her eyes kept drifting to the beautiful wooden pieces. Finally, she whispered, "Daddy, why can't I just look at the chess?" James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because I said so, Lucy. That's enough." Rebecca had built her business empire by reading people, and she sensed a story behind James's reaction. "Detective Mitchell, does Lucy play chess?" "She wants to learn," James said carefully. "But it's not something we do." Lucy looked confused by her father's words. "But Daddy, you taught me how the pieces move. You said maybe someday, Lucy." James's voice carried a warning that made the little girl fall silent. Rebecca felt a familiar ache in her chest as she watched the interaction. Something about the careful way James was avoiding her gaze, the way Lucy seemed confused by her father's reluctance. Reminded her of her own childhood, you know, Rebecca said softly. My father taught me to play when I was about Lucy's age. I was terrible at first, but he was so patient with me. James's expression grew pained. I'm sure he was a good teacher. He was, Rebecca replied, her voice growing distant. We played every Sunday morning before church. He used to say that chess teaches you to think 3 moves ahead in life, not just in the game. Lucy perked up at this. That's what Daddy says too. He said chess is like solving puzzles, and puzzles make your brain stronger. James closed his eyes briefly, and Rebecca saw him struggle with some internal battle. Detective Mitchell, Rebecca said gently, forgive me for prying, but is there a reason Lucy can't play? I promise the set is perfectly safe. James was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Lucy's older brother taught her the basics before he passed away last year. He was 15, brilliant at chess. He used to say he was going to teach her to be a grandmaster someday. Rebecca felt her breath catch. I'm so sorry for your loss. Car accident, James continued, his voice steady but strained. Daniel was coming home from chess club. I haven't been able to look at a chessboard since, without thinking about that phone call. Lucy looked between her father and Rebecca with the wise eyes of a child who had learned about loss too early. Daddy gets sad when I ask about chess, but I want to remember Danny. The words hung in the air like a challenge and a prayer all at once. Rebecca looked at this little girl who was trying to hold on to her brother's memory and at her father who was drowning in his grief and felt something crack open in her own carefully guarded heart. Lucy, Rebecca said softly, would you like to make the first move? James started to protest. Miss Harrison, you don't have to. Please, Rebecca interrupted gently. Let her play. Lucy looked at her father with hopeful eyes. After a moment that felt like eternity, James nodded slowly. Lucy approached the chess set with the reverence of someone entering a sacred space. She studied the board carefully, her small fingers hovering over the pieces as she considered her options. Danny always said the first move should be brave, she whispered. Then, with careful deliberation, she moved her king's pawn 2 squares forward, the classic opening that had begun countless games throughout history. Rebecca stared at the board, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, sitting across from her father in his study on a Sunday morning. She could almost hear his voice, the king's pawn opening. Becca, classic, strong, honest, just like you're going to be. But it wasn't the move itself that broke her. It was the way Lucy placed the pawn with such gentle precision, the same way Rebecca's father had taught her. It was the courage in such a small gesture from a child who had lost so much. It was the recognition that this little girl was trying to honor her brother's memory through a game that her father could no longer bear to play. Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks before she could stop them. She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by a grief she thought she had conquered and a beauty she hadn't expected to find. Ms. Harrison, James said, alarmed, are you all right? Rebecca wiped her eyes, struggling to compose herself. I'm sorry. It's just that your daughter just made the exact same opening move my father taught me 30 years ago. She looked at Lucy, who was watching her with concern. That's a very good move, sweetheart. Your brother taught you well. Lucy beamed. Danny said it was his favorite because it's honest. He said honest moves are the best kind. Rebecca moved her own king's pawn forward to mirror Lucy's move. He sounds like he was very wise. He was, Lucy said solemnly. He said chess was like talking without words. You tell stories with the pieces. As they played, something magical happened in that mahogany-paneled office. Lucy's innocent joy in the game began to chip away at the walls of grief that both adults had built around their hearts. James found himself leaning forward, offering gentle guidance when Lucy hesitated over a move. Rebecca discovered that teaching came as naturally to her as breathing, just as it had to her father all those years ago. Lucy, Rebecca said as the little girl considered her next move, what story are you telling with your pieces? Lucy tilted her head thoughtfully. I'm telling the story about a princess who has to protect her kingdom, but she's not scared because she has friends to help her. Rebecca smiled through fresh tears. That's a beautiful story. As the game progressed, James began to relax. The terrible association he'd built between chess and loss started to give way to something else. The joy of watching his daughter's mind work, the pride in seeing her apply lessons her brother had taught her, the healing that comes from honoring memory through continued living. "Your move, Miss Harrison," Lucy said politely. Rebecca moved her bishop, then looked across the board at this remarkable child. "Lucy, can I tell you something about chess that my father taught me?" "Yes, ma'am. He used to say that the most important thing about chess isn't winning or losing. It's learning that every piece on the board has value, even the smallest pawn. And sometimes those pawns can become the most powerful pieces of all." Lucy nodded seriously, like how small people can do big things. Exactly like that. 20 minutes later, Lucy had managed to put Rebecca in check with a combination that showed real understanding of the game. Rebecca made the necessary move to protect her king, then smiled at the little girl across from her. "Lucy, that was an excellent game. You should be very proud." "Danny would have been proud too," Lucy said softly. James reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand. For the first time since entering the office, he looked directly at the chess set without pain clouding his features. "Yes," he said quietly. "Danny would have been very proud." Rebecca stood and walked to her desk, returning with a business card that she handed to James. "Detective Mitchell, I'd like to propose something beyond our original meeting." James looked at the card, confused. "This is for a chess instructor, Magnus Petrov. He's a grandmaster who teaches children. He's been looking for exceptional students." Rebecca knelt down to Lucy's level. "Lucy, would you like to continue learning chess?" "Really? Learning it the way your brother would have wanted?" Lucy's eyes grew wide. "Really? I could learn to be as good as Danny. With practice and dedication, you could be even better than Danny, but more importantly, you could carry on what he started teaching you." James's voice was thick with emotion. "Miss Harrison, we couldn't possibly afford." "The Harrison Foundation has a new scholarship program for exceptional young minds," Rebecca interrupted smoothly. "Lucy would be our first recipient." As they prepared to leave, Lucy carefully reset the chess pieces the way her brother had taught her. "Miss Harrison, would you like to play again sometime?" Rebecca knelt down and hugged the little girl gently. "I would love that, Lucy. I think your brother would like knowing that his sister helped me remember how much I love this game." 6 months later, Rebecca's office had been transformed. The chess set still occupied its place of honor, but now it was joined by photos from the weekly chess club that met in the building's community room. Lucy had become not just an exceptional player, but a teacher herself, showing other children the moves her brother had taught her. James had become a regular visitor, no longer avoiding the chess set, but often staying after meetings to watch his daughter play. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something beautiful, a living memorial to Daniel's memory. And Rebecca had discovered something she hadn't expected, that sometimes healing comes not from forgetting our pain, but from finding ways to honor what we've lost by helping others discover what they might gain. The chess set that had once been a symbol of loneliness and loss had become something else entirely. A bridge between past and future, a tool for building connection, and a reminder that the most profound moves in life, like the best moves in chess, often come from the smallest and most vulnerable pieces on the board. Lucy never did become a grandmaster, but she became something better. A young woman who understood that true victory isn't about defeating opponents, but about helping others discover their own strength. And every time she sat down at a chessboard, she carried with her the love of a brother who had taught her that honest moves are always the best kind, and the wisdom of a father who had learned that honoring memory sometimes means having the courage to continue playing the game. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the healing power of connection and memory, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need this message today. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected kindness and the beautiful ways that love finds us when we least expect it. And please comment below about a time when a simple gesture helped you heal from loss or connect with someone in an unexpected way. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear,